Rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman. So Black Panther Wakanda Forever has officially been released, and it is a final MCU movie in Phase 4, and sees Wakanda dealing with the loss of T'Challa and having to face this new threat of Namor the Submariner. Now, when I came out of this movie, I wasn't exactly sure how to feel. I hadn't quite processed everything yet. I had to sleep on it, kind of work through my thoughts, and I'm pretty sure at this point that I know where I stand for now. I'm pretty confident in how I feel about this movie. It certainly could change on rewatch. I don't know exactly when I'm going to rewatch it. Probably not in theaters because of my specific issues with the movie and how long it is. But as of right now, I'm pretty sure this is where I stand. So I'm going to do this in 2 separate sections. I'm going to do a spoiler-free section where I quickly give my summary of thoughts on the movie without getting into specifics. Then I'll give my grade. And then I will get into the spoiler-filled section where I talk about everything about the movie that I wanted to talk about in spoiler-filled detail. I'm going to save the Chadwick Boseman stuff for the spoiler-filled section because I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'm going to put my personal feelings about how that I think that should have been handled aside for my spoiler-free section. So without further ado, let's get into my spoiler-free review. And there's a lot to love about this movie, starting with the performances. They were absolutely excellent in this movie. Angela Bassett, I think, is the best performance in this movie, and maybe the best performance in the entire MCU, and one of the best performances I've seen all year and in a long time. A lot of people have been saying that she should get nominated for Best Supporting Actress. I completely agree. I know that comic book movies, superhero movies, don't generally get actor nominations aside from Heath Ledger in Dark Knight, but I think Angela Bassett was that good in this movie, and a lot of the emotional beats and deep themes came from her, how she's dealing with the stuff that happened and her interactions with Shuri. And one of the best scenes in the entire movie is an interaction between her and Okoye, which I will get to the specifics of that in the spoiler review, but she brings just so much gravity and emotion to this character that I haven't seen really anything like it in the entire MCU. She is absolutely incredible. One of the best in the world right now. It's also great to see Lupita Nyong'o back. We hadn't seen her since the first Black Panther. She didn't appear in any of the Avengers movies, Infinity War, Endgame, or anything. Looking fucking gorgeous in this movie, by the way. Holy shit. I wish we got more of her in the movie, honestly. She didn't show up until about 45 minutes to an hour in. Letitia Wright is great as Shuri as well. She is basically the new main character of the movie, and a lot of the emotional beats are through her character, dealing with the themes of loss and grief and anger and rage, and I think that stuff was explored really well for the most part, not perfectly, which I'll get into in my spoiler-filled section, but for the most part, I like what they did with Shuri. And then you also get Winston Duke as M'Baku, who is one of my favorite characters in the entire MCU. His performance is great again. I wish they would have done a little bit more with him action-wise, and again, I'll get more into that in my spoiler-filled section, but he's such a badass guy that he doesn't really get any cool action moments in this movie. I really wanted that, but he definitely has the best jokes in the movie. He's a very funny character, and he also has some really nice interactions with Shuri and is kind of a mentor to her throughout the movie, kind of the voice of reason, which I really, really liked. And of course, Denai Guerrera as Okoye is great as always. Namor is awesome for the most part. I have slight issues with Namor about his motivations. I don't think they did quite enough work for me to completely buy into what he wanted to do, but I'll talk about that more in my spoiler-filled section. But the performance by Tenoch Huerta, I hope I said that right. I probably butchered the hell out of that name, but did the best I could. He was excellent in the movie and provides a wide range of emotions for the character. I love how the character can be both extremely intimidating and threatening and powerful, but also be kind of likable and charming at times. And you like seeing some of these characters interact with him, and you feel like you could hang out with him. Like, that's a very wide range of emotions and dynamics for an actor to display, and I thought that he did an incredible job. I also really liked the visuals of the underwater stuff. I thought all that looked really cool. The visuals overall, I thought were a vast improvement in this movie over the first one. The first one has some cool visuals, but with the expanding the lore a little bit and seeing the underwater stuff, some great visuals in this one. Ryan Coogler is also really good from a directing standpoint. I have a few issues with some of the writing, but I'll get to that. He's incredible at directing movies, and he's really good at directing smaller action, like one-on-one, one-on-two, one-on-three, kind of more hand-to-hand fights. He's excellent at that. Although some of the bigger scale action, we saw his limitations when it comes to that in the first Black Panther movie. Some of the CGI was not great. That's the case in this one as well, and I have some issues with the third act battle seeming too small in scale when it should have been much bigger given what was actually happening. I actually enjoyed a action sequence that occurred earlier in the movie, where kind of a big turning point in the movie. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I preferred that a little bit to the final battle. Ludwig Göransson once again provides a phenomenal score. He's one of the best working today. I'm not sure if I like this one quite as much as the original Black Panther score, but it is very good and very different. I liked what he did with a lot of the Dora Milaje stuff, and then with the underwater stuff. Göransson is definitely one of the best composers working today. But my biggest issue with the movie, aside from some of the smaller stuff I've already mentioned, is that it is just too long and bloated and overstuffed. When they said this movie was going to be 2 hours and 40 minutes long, that worried me a little bit, but I'm like, hey, I'll wait till I see it, and maybe that runtime was justified, and I just don't think it was. There were 2 subplots involving Everett Ross's character and Ironheart that could have completely been cut out of the movie. I understand people saying that the Ironheart stuff was essential to the plot. It didn't have to be. You could have come up with another way to have this conflict arise and not have this kind of side track in the movie. Could have cut out at least 20 minutes there. They're trying to set up future MCU projects, and the MCU has always done that, and I've never really been a big fan of that unless it makes more sense and it's set up more organically and doesn't... I like when they do it when it's not a plot line that could have been cut out of the movie and wouldn't have really changed anything. I like when they intertwine it into the plot in a way that makes a little bit more sense, and I thought in this case that they didn't. And then they also had to find a way to work the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman into this movie. And watching the movie, it seems like they stuck with mostly what the original plan was for this movie, but then also decided to intertwine the passing of Chadwick Boseman. And I just don't think it worked all that well in parts. I think I liked the exploration of the themes that they did, but when you throw that in there with all of the other stuff that was already going on in this movie, it can feel a little bit wonky and inconsistent sometimes emotionally and structurally. But despite the issues I have with this movie, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is definitely worth a watch because of the excellent performances, the excellent score, the great visuals, the themes that are explored here, and some great character interactions. So overall, I'm going to give Black Panther: Wakanda Forever a 7 out of 10. So there you have it, guys. That is my spoiler-free section. I'm now going to get into my spoiler-filled section. You have been warned. All right, let's do it. So I'm going to start right off with addressing the elephant in the room, and that is the passing of Chadwick Boseman and how they handled that in this movie. And it's a perfect thing to start off with because the movie literally starts off with T'Challa dying of an illness. And this is something that I have not talked about on my channel. I've not talked about it in public much because it is a very complicated and heated topic to discuss. So I don't know, I'm probably going to get some shit for this because people on both sides get mad at each other, but I think it is a interesting discussion that has valid points on both sides, and that is the recast T'Challa discussion. And I have firmly been on the side that T'Challa should have been recasted for a long time. And there are a lot of things in this movie that I am certainly willing to change my mind on upon people convincing me or upon a rewatch, but this is not one of them. I think it was a massive mistake to kill off T'Challa as a character and not recast him, because as great as Chadwick Boseman was, and he was incredible, don't get me wrong, don't misconstrue what I'm saying, I love Chadwick Boseman, he was amazing in the role, I just think the character is too important to not continue on. And they kind of find a way to sort of continue on with the end credit scene, which I will definitely get to. I'll touch a little bit more on this when I talk about that specifically, but I think it would have been a better choice to either delay this movie, and don't say that Marvel had deadlines or anything, because they didn't. Nate Moore said that they weren't even being forced to make this movie, that it was an option that Disney and Marvel told them, hey, you don't have to make another movie. So they did what they thought was right, and I respect that. It's totally fine. Again, there are many different viewpoints on this, and they thought this was the correct direction to go. But I think it would have worked better if they had either waited to make this movie and then recast him and make it, or find a way to take T'Challa out of the story without killing off the character, without having to make people relive the real-life tragedy with Chadwick Boseman's passing, like they did with Fast and Furious with Brian. I like that a lot better. Take him out of the story, have a good send-off, but also leave the option open to recast and bring him back later so that people don't have to relive the real-life trauma. So that's my thoughts on that. The way they actually pulled it off in the movie, I thought was okay, given that they decided to kill off the character of T'Challa. I think they did a pretty good job with that, and kind of infusing the heart-shaped herb stuff and the fact that Killmonger burned all of it in the first Black Panther movie. I thought that was a interesting way to have T'Challa get killed off in this movie, and then have the stuff with Shuri having to recreate it later, and that's why there's no Black Panther for a while. So, again, given they decided to kill off T'Challa, they did a fairly decent job with it. That being said, while they were killing him off in the opening scene, I was thinking the whole time, I don't think this is the right way to go. I really wish they would have gone a different direction. But, that being said, it happens, and I do think that the tribute they do for him in the beginning and at the end, both very beautiful. A lot of people say that this entire movie is a tribute to Chadwick Boseman and is honoring his legacy. I don't quite understand that, because aside from a few conversations, he's almost kind of forgotten about for most of the movie, aside from the beginning and the end, which I thought the end especially was very effective, with Shuri kind of seeing her past visions and remembering him. I thought that was really well done, but there is a good portion of the movie where they don't mention him that much. So I didn't actually feel his presence as much as a lot of people said they did, and I didn't feel as emotional throughout the runtime as I thought I would, aside from the beginning and the end. But, that happens, and then they time jump 1 year later, and basically what's going on is Wakanda is viewed by the rest of the world as being weak, so people are trying to steal their vibranium and stuff. And this is where we get the first incredible scene involving Angela Bassett as Queen Ramonda, and she just stole the fucking show in this movie. The courtroom scene where she's telling them, Wakanda is not weak, we are still strong, and she just gives it her all, totally goes all out for that scene. That is not her best scene in the movie, but it is certainly up there. Her best scene I'll get to. I alluded to it a little bit in my spoiler-free section, but just incredible stuff. And then I really like the action with the Dora Milaje, fighting all these people that were trying to steal the vibranium. And Dora Milaje, they're awesome. And sometimes people forget how badass they are. And then Falcon and Winter Soldier reminded us, and then this movie reminded us. I think that Coogler does their action, the smaller fight scenes, really, really well. The other fight scene involving Okoye on the bridge with Namor's people, I thought was really well done too. And I also really like how she kicked their asses, basically thought she killed them, and it turns out that they're alive. And we're like, whoa, we're dealing with some serious threats here. These aren't regular people. This is going to be tough to be able to defeat Namor and his army. And she struggles against that bigger guy who is just as skilled as her, but is probably stronger. And then Shuri gets captured, and Riri Williams gets captured, and that kind of brings me to my issues with the Riri Williams or Ironheart stuff. And a lot of people defend this and say that because she's the scientist that created the technology that was able to find the vibranium, that's why that she was necessary for the movie. And I just think that there could have been a better way to get this conflict to rise without having to take this sidetrack to where they go to America to find Riri Williams. And for a vast majority of the movie, she's just kind of hanging out. So her inclusion definitely didn't feel necessary, and it felt like they were trying to set up Ironheart. I like the actress. I think she did a pretty good job. I enjoyed her, but certainly for a movie that's 2 hours and 40 minutes long, it feels like something that could have been cut out. That and the Everett Ross stuff, especially the Everett Ross stuff, didn't feel necessary at all. Like his interactions with DeFontaine, I think that's her name. And apparently they were married before, which is a fun little touch. But again, that is something that you can cut out all of their scenes from the movie and nothing really changes. So when I say it's bloated, 2 hours and 40 minutes long, you cut out those two things and the movie goes down significantly to probably 220 or 215. I just think it would have flowed much better, and I would be much more willing to rewatch it if that were the case. But Riri and Shuri get captured, and there is some cool stuff here. Like I said, I loved visuals of the underwater stuff. I also really love the interactions between Namor and Shuri. They have some really nice conversations. We get to learn more about Namor's backstory and how he's been around for hundreds of years, and that he went up to the surface and saw the slave owners and how shitty they were, and then he burned their house down and killed them, and then that's how he got his nickname, because he has no love for the surface world. I think that's cool. A lot of that is cool. How he got his name is cool. I love that he killed the slave owners. That was badass. But this is where my issue with his motivations come in. It just seems like a bit too much of a jump for me to go from the slave owners are bad, so I killed them, which is based, to I'm going to kill everyone on the surface world. Like, that was just a bit too much of a stretch for me, and people will say that this is very similar to Killmonger's motivations, and you'd be right. However, I think the main difference is they go full villain with Killmonger, and he is clearly deranged, and even though you understand where he's coming from and his motivations, what he's doing it mostly, honestly, for selfish reasons, and he has gone full villain, so it makes sense that that is the conclusion that he would come to. With Namor, he was almost portrayed as more of an anti-hero in this movie, not a sympathetic villain with a sympathetic backstory, someone who is actually a decent person, who is kind and empathetic and cares about his people, and he shows that multiple times throughout this movie. And someone like that, I just don't buy that they would be willing to go to war with the entire surface world with what they presented us in the movie. I just want a little bit more work to be done to get me to buy into that. That being said, like I said, the performance is excellent. I love how intimidating he can be, but also how likable he can be. And the likability is really showcased in his conversations with Shuri. They're really nice conversations and really cordial, like just two people talking. Like, yeah, I understand, why you feel that way and stuff like that. And it was really nice. And then that you contrast that with the fight they have later after Namor kills Queen Ramonda, which was a sad scene, and I sort of saw it coming, but this is something that I talk about. It feels weird with T'Challa not being in this movie. I feel like this would have worked a lot better if T'Challa was in the movie and they hadn't killed off the character, because it just feels a little bit weird to kill off Queen Ramonda in a movie where they already killed off King T'Challa. It feels like too much trauma for Shuri, too much death, and characters are motivated by death pretty much throughout this entire movie. And I would have much more liked to have seen T'Challa's reaction to Queen Ramonda's death. Now both his parents are dead. I feel like that would have worked a lot better to have her death in this movie if T'Challa was still alive. That being said, it was still pretty well done, and the idea that she could have survived but ended up saving Riri instead. And, the water bombs that Namor threw in there, those were really cool. And, as soon as he stabbed the glass with the spear, like, oh, she's in trouble. And even in the trailers, you could kind of see, based on how he was, getting up in her face, interacting with her, people were worried that she might die, as was I. And when it happened in the movie, I wasn't shocked, but I just would have, again, liked a little bit more if T'Challa was still around, so they didn't have to really double down on the trauma in this movie. But Namor is super badass, and despite this stuff that I talked about, the issues I had with it, that was kind of necessary in the movie to establish how much of a threat Namor really is and how powerful he really is. And I love the visualization of his character. Some of the CGI with him hopping around wasn't amazing, and that's what I'm talking about with the Black Panther movies not having great CGI, being much better at the close-up fights. Some of the stuff in the third act was not amazing, but I thought that Namor, for the most part, was really well done. I like the inclusion of the wings on his ankles. I thought that was a nice touch, and the performance and the layers to him and the range was all incredible. His interactions with Shuri, his interactions with Queen Ramonda, all great. I alluded to a scene with Queen Ramonda and Okoye in my spoiler-free section, and that is the scene where Queen Ramonda basically fires Okoye because she was the one who wanted to take Shuri to America, and basically she blames her for Shuri getting captured. And this is also where the line of her entire family being gone is in this movie, and I feel like they were intentionally being a little bit misleading with that line when they put in a trailer to give people a false sense of hope that maybe this could be taking place during the blip and they might not actually kill off T'Challa. I mean, they put it in the trailer for a reason, so that I didn't exactly love that, but the performance was excellent, and this is both from Denai Guerrera's side and especially Angela Bassett, just a showcase in excellent acting. Angela Bassett killed it throughout the entire movie, but this was probably her best scene in the entire movie, just how emotional she gets, how angry she gets, and you totally understand where she's coming from, even though you really like Okoye and sympathize with her. Like, yeah, I totally understand Queen Ramonda's anger and rage and sadness at this whole thing, so totally understandable, and Bassett just completely knocked it out of the park. I mean, I'm getting chills just thinking about this scene. The stuff with her is some of the best stuff in the entire movie. Shuri, I did allude to not everything quite working for her, and that's because she kind of goes through the exact same arc that T'Challa went through in Captain America Civil War, and it's a decent arc to have, but I wish they would have just gone a different direction and given us something a little bit unique, because while I was watching this, I'm like, yeah, I've seen this all before. I mean, they're doing it well, and I like the interaction between her and Killmonger when she goes to the ancestral plane, and I was surprised when he showed up, and I'm like, who's it going to be? So they're probably not going to do T'Challa. They're not going to, like, deep fake Chadwick Boseman. It could be her mom. And when it was Killmonger, I'm like, whoa! And, you know, Michael B., he's an incredible actor. He kills it again, and he didn't miss a beat when it comes to the character. So it was cool to see him again, and I love, you know, that conversation that they have where she says, I'm not nothing like you, but he explains how she basically is, and that's why you're seeing me. You know, your brother was too noble, your father was a hypocrite. You're going to take care of business like me, or you're going to be noble like your brother? Like, yeah, that makes total sense that he would be acting like this, and he is the same guy for sure that we remember from the first Black Panther, so it was cool to see him in there, even though by the end, like I said, Shuri basically has the same arc that T'Challa had in Civil War, where vengeance has consumed her. So I would have liked if they would have taken a little bit of a different direction with that, but certainly a lot of the themes with her and being at a surprising stage in the grieving process in the early part of the movie, I wish they would have gone a little bit deeper into that, honestly, and her being Black Panther, I'm fine with it in theory, and maybe they're hinting at the idea that she might not actually be Black Panther that long because she doesn't really want to be, and that's why it kind of does work in this movie, because she reluctantly becomes Black Panther because they need to protect her, and she didn't really want to do it, but she does because she is consumed by vengeance. And she actually uses the Killmonger Black Panther suit, which I thought was an interesting touch. Like, she goes right for that one. Like, well, we know where her mindset is at right now. But I kind of would have preferred if somebody else would have been Black Panther, like Okoye or Nakia, which again, I said it was great to see Nakia again in this movie. We've sorely missed her since the first Black Panther movie. Lupita Nyong'o is just such an incredible actress and kills in everything, super badass. Just would have liked if we had seen her earlier in the movie. But I also understand why she's kind of off doing her own thing, especially given what we find out in the post-credit scene, which I will get to. But Shuri's arc, I think, was mostly well done. I just wish I didn't quite... Her becoming Black Panther didn't quite have the impact that I wish it had. But again, maybe that was on purpose because she didn't really want to be Black Panther. So maybe, you know what, I'm just going to go to the end credit scene because I've been kind of dancing around it this whole time. Then I'm going to jump back a little bit and talk about some things. But T'Challa has a kid. He had a kid with Nakia who is also named T'Challa. So this is their way of kind of recasting without really recasting, kind of trying to find a way to make everyone happy. And I like it. I like the idea of having the kid be the new king, and I imagine they're probably going to find a way to age him up with all of the multiverse, Kang, time travel stuff. It wouldn't be that difficult to find an excuse to age him up and have him become the new King T'Challa. So that's kind of their way of recasting, and I certainly have my ideas of who should play the adult version of him, John David Washington being my number one choice. But I still wish they hadn't killed off the original T'Challa. I just don't love the idea of that. I would have preferred if they did what they did with Brian in Fast and Furious, have him kind of retire, be out of the action, but we know he's still around in universe, and then have his kid be aged up and become the new Black Panther, new T'Challa. That would have been perfect, because I think, based on what this movie's saying, I think they're saying that Shuri probably isn't going to be Black Panther for that long, because she doesn't really want to be, so the kid gets aged up and becomes Black Panther. I would be totally fine with that, and if only they hadn't killed off the original T'Challa, then that would have been perfect for me. I would have, yeah, that's actually a really smart way to recast T'Challa without having to be disrespectful to Chadwick Boseman. I don't really think it is, but a lot of people say that, so that would have been the perfect way to basically please everyone. So we'll see exactly where they go with that. But I just want to go back a little bit to the Shuri vengeance stuff. I like the execution of her battling Namor and the idea of like drying him out. I thought that was a cool idea, like, hey, we got to dry him out so he's not as powerful. However, once they get to the beach for the one-on-one fight, which I think the fight itself was well done, Namor could have just jumped in the water to power himself up again. So that kind of bugged me, and I'm thinking when they get there, I'm like, so he's just going to jump right back in the water, right? Because he could easily do that, but he doesn't. So that was a little bit weird. That seems like a bit of a plot hole, bit of a logic issue to me, but the fight itself was good, and it makes sense given that he didn't jump in the water, even though I think he could have and easily, that he should have and easily could have. The fight itself, given the fact that he didn't do that, I think was well done. I mean, Shuri was never going to defeat him at full power, so the fact that he wasn't at full power, it made sense to me that she was able to essentially defeat him, and like when she blows up the ship and stuff, I thought that was really cool and basically like burns him, like, whoa, that was fucking brutal. And I thought for a second that he might die, but like, no, they're not going to have her kill him. They're going to have her realize that vengeance has consumed her, just like they did in Civil War, and she's not going to do it. And she doesn't, and they end up basically joining forces because she makes him yield, like, hey, if you yield right now, we'll become allies, and we'll stop the fighting, and I won't kill you. So I'm okay with that. We'll see what they do with Namor in the future. Again, the character is really, really interesting, and I imagine he's basically going to be on the good side for the most part going forward, so we'll see what they do with that. I'm glad they didn't kill him off because I love this actor in the role, and he's a very interesting character. So, yeah, the final battle was cool, except for the fact that, like I kind of alluded to in my spoiler-free section, that Winston Duke, despite me liking a lot of things about him in this movie, definitely the best jokes came from him, and then him kind of consoling Shuri after the death of Queen Ramonda, and being the voice of reason and like a mentor throughout the movie. That stuff was really well done. I thought that their interactions, their dialogue was great. But for being someone who's such a badass fighter, I wanted at least one badass fighting moment, even if nothing else, to redeem himself for basically getting his ass kicked by Namor earlier in the movie before Namor kills Queen Ramonda. And I thought for a second that he'd die there. I mean, he better not fucking be dead. He wasn't. He was fine. And that was basically to establish just how powerful Namor is. I was fine with that, but I wish he could have gotten a little bit of a redemptive moment in the third act where he can kick someone's ass, because he's fully capable of doing that. It would have been pretty satisfying. But I think I've touched on pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in the spoilery section of this video. It's very possible I could be forgetting something. And like I said, with most of this stuff, it is very possible that I could change my mind, certainly by watching it again, because I've only seen it once, or by listening to other people's viewpoints. I'm not dug in on most of my thoughts on a lot of aspects of this movie. The recast T'Challa stuff, I'm pretty firm on, and I don't think I will ever move on that. I think it was the wrong move to not recast him, even though I certainly empathize with and understand the other side of the argument. But overall, it's a movie that it has a lot going for it, certainly has great moments, has some really high highs with the emotional stuff, with the character interactions and the performances. Again, Angela Bassett better get nominated for Best Supporting Actress, because she is just insanely awesome in this movie in every single way. Just gives it her all. You totally believe that she's someone who has lost her son and is angry and sad. She portrayed that all perfectly. performances across the board were great, improved on the visual standpoint, even though I could touch a little bit more on the third act to where I thought it was too small. I wish, given the fact that you have these two advanced nations with huge armies fighting against each other, I wish they would have picked a different spot for the final battle instead of just fighting on a boat. That seems a little bit too small. It doesn't seem like a great setting for the final battle. I wish they would have gone a little bit bigger, given how large scale that battle should have been. So that's about... And, just Coogler is not amazing, like I said, at the big CGI battles. Some of the CGI was wonky. So the third act, I think, was a little bit better than the one in the first one, but third act is definitely a weakness. Not the third act overall necessarily, but the final battle is a weakness of both of these movies. And then this one, I would put it quite a bit below the first one because of the fact that it is overstuffed. There were some plot lines that weren't necessary to the movie, and I just thought it was a little bit wonky, didn't quite flow as well as the first one because of those plot lines and because of the T'Challa stuff and the fact that they had to work that into a movie that already had a lot going on. So it's a good movie, but it is a little bit disappointing for me, and it doesn't come near the first Black Panther movie, and it's probably going to be in the bottom half of my MCU ranking, which will be posted pretty soon, which is going to be a lot of fun. There's an even 30 movies in the MCU now, so stay tuned for that. And I actually got a lot more MCU content coming. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, if you want to see some of that stuff, subscribe, and the notification bell, get notified when I post a video. If you're an MCU fan, you're really going to love a lot of stuff I have coming. If you enjoyed this video, despite disagreeing, whether you agree or disagree with me, hit the like if you like the way I explain myself, and then drop a comment below, start a conversation. A lot of people are going to disagree with a lot of things I said here, and that's fine. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's be cordial. Let's be civil. Let's be nice. And I love, civil discussions about movies with people I disagree with, but when they get nasty, it's like, that's not constructive at all. So if you disagree with me, go ahead. Let me know why, and we'll talk about it. I certainly willing to have a conversation with anyone about this movie as long as it's civil. So anyway, stay tuned for my MCU stuff, and I will see you soon.